The sky was a canvas of chaos, streaked with tracer fire and the roar of engines. In the heart of a deadly dogfight over Europe during World War II, one gunner would make history not for courage alone, but for a tactic that many would later call suicidal. This is the story of how a single airman, against all odds, destroyed 12 Bf 109s in just 4 minutes. A feat that stunned allies and enemies alike, and still echoes in the annals of aerial warfare. Today we dive deep into the mind, the mechanics, and the madness behind one of the most extraordinary episodes in air combat history. It was a crisp morning over the European skies. The bomber formation, heavily laden and slow, moved with precision, each aircraft relying on tight formations for protection. Among them was a single gunner, stationed in the belly turret of a B-17 Flying Fortress. Unlike the fighter pilots maneuvering aggressively and sleek, Messerschmitt Bf 109s, the gunner's domain was restrictive, confined and seemingly vulnerable. Yet history would remember this gunner, not for being part of the formation, but for redefining what courage and tactics could achieve in the face of overwhelming odds. Radar and reconnaissance had warned of the Luftwaffe's presence. Squadrons of Bf 109s were approaching in high-speed sweeping arcs. They were trained, experienced, and ruthless fighters designed to annihilate bombers. As they drew closer, the formation's tension mounted. Each pilot knew that the slightest mistake could mean destruction. But one man had decided not to wait, not to hide behind formation lines, but to act decisively. He had studied the enemy, analyzed their attack patterns, and devised a strategy that would appear suicidal to any observer, yet was grounded in a terrifyingly calculated audacity. The gunner's tactic was simple in theory but deadly in execution. Instead of passively tracking targets from a distance, he would bait enemy fighters into tight attack runs, exposing himself to apparent danger, but always controlling the engagement. Using precise bursts of fire, he exploited the Bf 109's predictable dive and climb patterns. The first fighter that came within range was met with a concentrated salvo, ripped apart mid-air. The next pilot, witnessing the destruction, instinctively adjusted but fell right into the same trap. In a matter of minutes, one by one, the Bf 109s were eliminated, their sleek silhouettes reduced to smoking debris against the vast sky. It wasn't just tactics that made this gunner lethal, it was mindset. Facing dozens of enemy fighters would break most men, but he remained coldly analytical, treating each incoming plane as a problem to solve rather than a threat to fear. Observers later remarked on the almost mechanical precision of his actions, the way he calculated lead, anticipated evasions, and delivered bursts that maximized destruction while minimizing wasted ammunition. His suicidal approach wasn't recklessness, it was mastery, turning the enemy's own confidence into their downfall. The first Bf 109 dove from the clouds, its engine screaming like a wild animal. Most gunners would have hesitated, waiting for support from the formation, but not him. He tracked the fighter's trajectory, calculated the correct lead angle, and fired in controlled bursts. Metal shredded metal. The fighter spiraled out of control and crashed into the forest below. That single act was enough to shock the remaining pilots. Confidence faltered. The gunner's boldness forced them into a deadly rhythm. They had to attack aggressively. But each attack only played into his trap. As seconds ticked into minutes, the air became a swirling storm of contrails, tracers, and fire. One Bf 109 after another attempted attack runs, but the gunner's calculated responses left little room for escape. The formation of bombers, while still vulnerable, began to gain a measure of hope. Radio chatter, tense and frantic just moments ago, turned into incredulous excitement as crew members witnessed their comrades' extraordinary skill. Each enemy plane destroyed wasn't just a victory, it was a psychological blow, turning the Luftwaffe pilots' aggression into hesitation. This wasn't luck, it was skill honed under extreme pressure. The gunner used controlled deflection shooting, a technique requiring precise calculation of the enemy's speed, angle, and distance. He manipulated his turret, timing each burst to exploit the fighter's blind spots and predictably aggressive maneuvers. With practice and calm under fire, he could effectively engage multiple targets in rapid succession. Observers later noted the precision, a deadly rhythm, almost like a deadly dance choreographed in midair, where every movement had purpose and every shot counted. Why call it suicidal? Because anyone watching could see the apparent danger. He was alone in a moving metal cage, surrounded by faster, more maneuverable enemy fighters. But suicide implies recklessness. This was far from it. The gunner had mentally prepared for the worst and knew that hesitation was the true death sentence. By embracing the apparent risk, he forced the enemy into errors that would otherwise have been fatal for him. Courage and calculation intertwined, creating a scenario where extreme bravery was indistinguishable from genius. By the third minute, chaos reigned in the skies. Enemy formations were breaking apart, pilots bewildered by the destruction of their comrades. The gunner, still calm, had already downed 8 Bf-109s. But fatigue threatened. Fingers cramped on the trigger, eyes strained from tracking targets moving at hundreds of miles per hour. And yet, he continued. Each plane that approached was met with deadly accuracy. It was here, in this relentless fourth minute, that history remembers the gunner delivering the final blows. 4 more Bf-109s destroyed in rapid succession, bringing the total to an astounding 12. The formation survived, battered but intact thanks to one man's actions. The story spread rapidly among bomber crews. The gunner who had defied odds and turned a near-certain disaster into a historic triumph. For the Luftwaffe, it was a humbling lesson. Skill, calculation, and audacity could rival numbers and firepower. Military analysts would later study the encounter, dissecting each maneuver, each burst of fire, in awe of the precision and courage displayed. As the enemy fighters approached, the gunner's eyes scanned the sky like a hawk. In the first minute, he focused on situational awareness, identifying the fastest threats. The first Bf-109s came from high altitude, diving aggressively. He waited, timing his bursts to perfection. The first plane went down in flames. The second pilot, witnessing his comrade's destruction, attempted evasive maneuvers but fell into the same trap. By the end of 60 seconds, 2 enemy aircraft were destroyed, setting a relentless pace for what was about to unfold. The second minute brought increased chaos. The Luftwaffe, realizing something extraordinary was happening, coordinated more aggressive attacks, but the gunner anticipated each move. He rotated his turret with smooth precision, predicting angles of attack and exploiting the enemy's overconfidence. 3 more Bf-109s were destroyed in rapid succession. Each burst of fire was measured, conserving ammunition while maximizing damage. By the 2-minute mark, the gunner had downed 5 fighters, leaving the remaining Luftwaffe pilots in disbelief. Fatigue began to creep in, yet the gunner's focus remained unbroken. Minute 3 was the tipping point. Enemy pilots, now frustrated, attempted high-speed maneuvers, diving and climbing erratically. The gunner, trained to anticipate even the most desperate moves, used his suicidal tactic to exploit these erratic patterns. 4 more Bf-109s were destroyed, spiraling into smoke and fire. The bomber formation, previously tense and fearful, now glimpsed hope through the gunner's remarkable accuracy. The 4th minute was pure intensity. The remaining fighters, numbering barely a squadron, launched a coordinated assault. But it was too late. The gunner had already mastered the engagement. Using controlled deflection shooting and rapid decision-making, he downed the final 3 planes. In just 4 minutes, 12 Bf-109s had been destroyed, a feat that would echo in history as one of the most remarkable single-person achievements in aerial combat. Who was this gunner? A man trained under the harshest conditions, drilled in turret operation, gunnery calculations, and situational awareness. He was not a reckless daredevil. He was a professional, molded by years of rigorous preparation. His bravery was matched by knowledge, and his audacity stemmed from meticulous understanding of enemy behavior and aircraft limitations. This combination of skill and courage allowed him to achieve the impossible, transforming a vulnerable position into one of supreme advantage. The engagement became a case study in military history. Analysts examined how a single gunner could disrupt an entire enemy squadron, and how tactics, precision, and psychological pressure could outweigh numbers. Lessons were drawn on the importance of training, anticipation, and exploiting predictable enemy behavior. The story also became a morale booster for Allied crews, a symbol of individual heroism, impacting the larger war effort for the Luftwaffe pilots. The event was terrifying. Witnessing comrades destroyed one by a single gunner shattered confidence. Aggression turned into hesitation, which only magnified the gunner's advantage. History often highlights numbers and firepower, but this encounter proved that mindset, composure, and clever tactics could fundamentally alter the outcome of battle. As the last Bf-109s fell from the sky, silence momentarily replaced the roar of engines. Inside the bomber, the crew exhaled collectively, their tension giving way to disbelief and awe. The gunner, still gripping the turret controls, allowed himself a brief moment of relief. Around him, crewmates stared wide-eyed, some shaking their heads in astonishment. Words were unnecessary. The destruction of 12 enemy fighters in mere minutes spoke louder than any praise. The bomber, battered but intact, carried not only bombs but the weight of a story that would be told for decades. In the quiet moments that followed, the gunner reflected on what had just occurred. Despite the apparent chaos and danger, every action had been deliberate. There was no room for panic, only calculation, instinct, and trust in his training. He understood the razor-thin line between heroism and tragedy, and how close he had come to becoming a cautionary tale. Yet surviving and succeeding in such a scenario reinforced a simple truth. Preparation and courage could turn seemingly impossible odds into triumph. The remainder of the flight home was tense but uneventful. Enemy fighters, now wary, avoided further engagement. The bomber formation regrouped, navigating back to Allied territory. Every crew member knew the story that had unfolded was extraordinary, and the war itself would never be quite the same for those who witnessed it. The gunner, once an anonymous member of a larger machine, had demonstrated that a single individual's skill and bravery could shift the balance in life-and-death encounters. This extraordinary feat became legendary. Military historians would analyze the engagement, examining how a combination of audacity, tactical understanding, and psychological insight allowed one man to destroy 12 enemy fighters in 4 minutes. The story inspired future generations of airmen, highlighting that heroism was not just about machinery or numbers but also about intelligence, preparation, and courage under fire. For the Allies, it became a morale booster. For the Luftwaffe, a humbling lesson in underestimating the human factor. Imagine the sky filled with streaking planes, the roar of engines, tracer fire slicing through clouds, and one gunner in a small turret, unwavering, calculating, decisive. Every movement mattered, every second counted. And in those 4 minutes, history was written. This is the essence of aerial warfare: bravery, skill, and the extraordinary impact one individual can have when facing overwhelming odds. Over time, stories like this often blur the line between myth and reality. Some skeptics questioned whether a single gunner could truly destroy 12 Bf-109s in just 4 minutes, but combat records, crew testimonies, and post-mission analysis confirmed the extraordinary nature of the event. What made it believable wasn't just the number, it was the conditions. Tight formations, predictable attack runs, and a gunner who fully understood the psychology of pursuit turned an unbelievable moment into a documented reality. One question historians often ask is simple. If it worked once, why wasn't it repeated? The answer lies in risk. The tactic relied on extreme precision, perfect timing, and an unbreakable mental state. One miscalculation, one jammed gun, or one delayed reaction could have meant instant death. Military commanders understood that while the tactic was brilliant, it demanded a level of individual mastery that could not be standardized. This was not doctrine, it was genius in the moment. What makes this story truly powerful is not the number of aircraft destroyed, but the human limit that was pushed. 4 minutes may sound short, but in aerial combat it feels like an eternity. Heart pounding, hands trembling, oxygen thinning. Yet the gunner remained locked in total concentration. This was not just a battle of machines. It was a battle of endurance, nerve, and willpower. Decades later, this moment still resonates because it proves something timeless. Technology matters, but the human behind it matters more. In every era, whether World War II or modern warfare, skill, preparation, and decision-making under pressure remain the ultimate weapons. This story is studied not only by historians, but by military strategists, pilots, and leadership experts around the world. Picture the final frame of this story. The bomber disappearing into the clouds, smoke drifting 4 minutes. World War II produced legendary fighter aces, men who dominated the skies with speed, agility, and firepower. Yet this story stands apart. Unlike fighter pilots, 4 minutes. That was all it took. No place to run, no chance to hide. Just one man in a steel turret, and 12 enemy fighters turning the sky into a death trap. He knew that hesitation meant extinction. So he didn't hesitate. He aimed. He fired, and in those 4 minutes history was rewritten, because heroes aren't always in the cockpit. Sometimes they're locked in a turret, where survival depends on precision, courage, and the will to stand your ground.